Welcome to the Pockets of Knowledge podcast. I'm your host, Desiree Stanley, here to share some amazing conversations. We're talking business, health, making and saving money, or starting something epic. Think of this as your go-to spot for stories that do a lot more than just kill time. They spark ideas, give you a boost, and perhaps even change the way you look at the world. I'm pulling in the experts, the thinkers, the doers, and the dreamers. We're about to dive into stories that open doors and ideas that light up your brain. Here we go. Welcome, everyone, to the Pockets of Knowledge podcast. I'm your host, Desiree Stanley, and with me today is my guest, Merit Kahn. Welcome to the show, Merit. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. I am so excited for this conversation. And I was talking your ear off before we got started because I cannot wait for the listeners to learn about you and learn about the amazing show you created. And so not to get too ahead of myself here, let me just share a little bit about you, Merit. You are an author, you're a playwright, you're a producer and a performer. And I hinted at your show, and it's called Optimistic Personality Disorder. And we'll get into that as we go into the show. But really, you're a stand-up comedian. You are also an entrepreneur. You're a certified speaking professional and emotional intelligence certified expert. So you've got a lot of knowledge and a lot of experience. And so we're going to get into that today. Would you tell us, Merit, how this came to be for you? What led you down this path?
I think even from a young age, I was drawn to performing in some capacity. I'm not sure if it was the performing or little short skirts, because I played tennis, I did ice skating, I was a cheerleader. So all of those, and a baton twirler. So all of those things involved short skirts. So I'm not exactly sure where my main interest was, but yeah, I think I was just always drawn to making people laugh and the entertainment value, and I wanted to make a difference, and I wanted to, shift people's vibe and attitudes. I had a sales training company for many years. Right after I graduated college, I was in the radio advertising business and sales, and then I began keynote speaking, and it was really all about how do I help get somebody from where they are now to where they want to be. And sometimes that was with content and teaching them to sell better or lead better or understand themselves better from an emotional intelligence standpoint. And sometimes it's just, you go to a stand-up comedy show and you're in a bad mood, and by the time you leave, you're not in a bad mood. And all of those things, I think that's pretty much the common denominator for me, is I always felt like there was something more that was possible. And if whatever way I could help you get there, that's kind of what I'm all about.
Thank you for sharing that with us. And you absolutely can see that in all of the things you did. You love to perform, entertain, teach, share. It just sounds like you did really come at it's from all angles, right? However you can best serve the audience, it sounds like it is what you're going to do to get them to where they need to be. And so let's dive into your show, which again is the Optimistic Personality Disorder. And you tell us like how this developed, because it sounds like it was an interesting way to teach.
Yeah, it started as a little project. So it was before my 50th birthday. A friend of mine had an idea. She was going to do 50 things before her 50th birthday. And I thought, that's really cool. So I started making my list of things I would do. And the first thing was I wanted to go back to places that I had visited as a backpacker when I was 25 years old. And I wanted to go back to some of those places when I was 50. So that was the first thing on my list. And the second thing I wrote down was I want to do a one-woman show. And what was crazy about that was I had never before had a thought in my head about anything like that. And so when I saw it on paper, it was like, where did that come from? And I didn't do anything about it for 6 months. I procrastinated, put it on a shelf, and I was like, I don't know what that means, but we'll figure it out later. And as my birthday approached, I thought, I think I'm going to need to do something with this. Anyway, I wanted to look at my life story to that point. And my theory was we all have a narrative that is our own life story. And sometimes we craft a narrative that doesn't necessarily serve us. And so I had some things in my own history, and I thought, I wonder if I could rewrite my story as a comedy show. And that's really the genesis of the show. I took all the ups and downs. Look, if you made it to 50, you've had a roller coaster of a life. Like you just can't get out of 50 years without having some ups and downs. And so I just looked at my life story and I wrote it as a comedy show. That's it.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you for telling us like how that came to be. And what an interesting thing. I love the idea of writing down just things that you want to try and something out of the blue like that that probably was a little bit scary. You know, who would have thought you could do a stand-up show? I mean, that would scare the pants off me. So I don't know about how you felt about it initially, but was it something that was frightening for you, or did you think like, "This could be a lot of fun"?
Well, so my 50th birthday was 2019. So I'll date myself now. But so I had been doing stand-up comedy for about 5 years prior to that. It was when I started. And at first I saw the show as I'm going to do 50 minutes of original stand-up comedy for my 50th birthday. And at that point in time, I had about 20 minutes. I would have been what's called a feature act for a stand-up show. So not the headliner, but just, I had enough material to set up the headliner for a great show, and that's kind of the role. Um, in writing what I thought was just gonna be a 50-minute stand-up set, I was looking for different parts of my life to mine those stories for stand-up comedy, and what had ended up happening, because I was already a keynote speaker at that point, I had a lot of stories that I shared from my life. So some of them weren't necessarily funny, they had funny elements to them, but some of them were heartfelt, and they were meant to teach a lesson. As I was working on the birthday show, my dad and I were kind of looking at the script, and he said, "I don't see this as a stand-up set. I see this as a theater piece." And he had directed a lot of theater in his lifetime, so he's like, "Well, think about how you would stage this." And he just asked me some really good questions. And the next thing I know, I have a set, I have costume changes. It's like a whole thing. It's a script. It's got a through line. It's got lessons. And somebody had recently described it as, if a TED Talk and a tequila shot had a baby, it would be my show. And so that's a really great description. I couldn't have written that any better myself. But it's funny, but it's got some meat to it. It's heartwarming.
Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that more depth to how this came to be and your feelings on what you could do with it. And I love that it became, with this collaboration with your father, a theater show. And I've seen like some clips on your website, and of course, I'll share the details for that. But yeah, you definitely have some costume changes in there and some scene changes, and I can see how that would be a lot of fun. And it sounds like from the audience experience that it's just hilarious and like you shared, heartfelt. So that's awesome. But tell us, what are some of the lessons that are sort of woven into that? Because it sounds like that's there too.
There's a lot of lessons. So I divide my 50 years into 5 decades, and each decade has kind of a theme. So the first decade I call the adorable years. Some decades you never grow out of. And it's fun. I tell a story about my grandmother, my little grandma. And the as you get to kind of know a little bit about who my grandma is and the relationship that we had, you learn that she passed away when I was just 7 years old. And and here I am, more than 40 years later, and I still think about her every day. And later in the story of my life, when we get to about decade 3 or so, I had another experience where somebody remembered me 6 times longer than they'd ever known me. And so it's this really beautiful circular construction, we call it in the biz. But it's like, the lesson there for me was, we already are who we admire. If there's something you admire about somebody, it's likely that you have those same qualities, or they wouldn't resonate in you to admire them in someone else. And sometimes they're not fully developed. Sometimes, we could admire something in somebody else and wish we were more like that. And my point is, you're probably a little bit more like that than you think. And so look for those examples where you are embodying those same qualities. And so that was, not anything I ever thought about my grandma, but I do think about her a lot. And I have her picture in my office. And, she died when I was 7. It's like, wow, who is this woman that, that she made that much of an impact on a 7-year-old that I have her picture on my desk. It's like, that's pretty spectacular. And so there's some lessons like that. There's stories about, humor has always been a part of my life way before I started studying and performing stand-up comedy. But I was one of those people that used humor when the situation got a little stressful. You can count on Merit to like bring in the joke and bring the heat down. And sometimes that's not always appropriate. I have learned that. But I did learn that when you can find the funny, you can turn a bad situation around when things go awry. And so throughout the show, I'm constantly telling stories about how, well, that here goes this thing went awry and that thing went awry, and here's how humor came to save the day. So that's a big lesson. There's a woman in one of my testimonial reels. She was on video after the very first performance, and she said, "The show is about a journey back to who she's always been, and I could relate to that." And I was like, "Wow, she nailed it." Like that's the show. It's comical to me because there's a story I tell about being in 6th grade and they canceled the school musical, and I was like, "Oh, hell no, we're doing a school musical." And so I produced a school musical in the 6th grade, and here I am in my 50s producing a show. Like, that's crazy. So it's fun to watch myself, and I lead other people in having that experience to find moments in their life that show up later that is part of who they've always been.
Thank you for sharing that. There's so much in there that you said I love. The idea of the things that you admire in other people, there's that kernel or that inkling inside you already that maybe hasn't fully blossomed. And, so often we are like admiring people and thinking like I'm not as good as them or I could never be as successful as them. But the thing is that it's really inside you. You just
Exactly.
haven't explored it enough yet, or maybe pushed yourself enough outside of, the comfort that you've always been in, and you could get there. And so I love that you're sort of seeing that in the people that you admire, and it's probably in you. You just need a little bit more oomph to get it to grow, right? So
Exactly.
that was so good. And, the idea of these things that we really don't think are gonna be a big deal, like, that we're doing when we're little, and then they translate into something, and we look back on it, and we go, "Wow, that connection, I never would have thought." But it was probably just, like, under the surface your whole life, and when it was time, it blossomed and bloomed and became this amazing show that you created, so
Yeah.
love it.
Thanks.
Oh my gosh, good stuff. Okay, so you share about how you think that laughter often fills in where therapy maybe missed some things. And so do you want to share with us like what does that mean exactly?
Yeah, one of the things I say this in my keynote, for conferences that I speak at, and I say this in my theater show, but I believe that laughter lightens the load you hold. So
Mhm.
if you think about it, we're all stressed about something. And, when you're stressed, when you're holding a lot, it's heavy, right? It sounds heavy, it feels heavy. There's just a lot of, we say we have a weight on your shoulders, right? You've got, you're carrying a lot on your back, right? It's just all of that is heavy. And when you laugh, it's it's light, it's playful. There's nothing about laughter that is connected to heaviness, right? It's just, well, I suppose you could have a hearty laughter, but laughter is light. And so I've always believed that, laughter lightens the load you hold. When you laugh, you just kind of have to let some of it go. And it's when you let something go that you actually can hold more. It sounds a little counterintuitive. I'm not sure I'm explaining it exactly how I how I do in my programs. But when you laugh, you lighten up. When things are light, you can choose what you're picking up, and you can choose littler things or one thing at a time. You don't have to carry all of it. And so I just really think that I've seen it, I've experienced it, I've coached other people to, find the humor where humor wouldn't be the go-to experience in a situation like that. Like, oh, your parents are getting divorced. All right, well, what's funny about that's not like anybody's first question. But when you can ask yourself that question sooner in the process, you have access to more ideas, more creative solutions, more possibilities. And I think that is a really good problem solving strategy. So I've worked with teams, we've done emotional intelligence assessments, and problem solving is high, but stress tolerance was low. So they're not able to hold a lot of stress. So there's a lot of different ways you could coach a team to improve. And if they're not dealing with stress well, that's a good recommendation for like, okay, like let's maybe just all put this aside and just go head over to the comedy club for a little company outing, and let's all come back, have some laughs, have a breath, and then let's go attack this problem. And it's a totally different way of coming at business. It doesn't work for all business problems or personal problems, but I think it helps. I think it helps. Laughter.
Yeah, for sure, Merit, you're so right. It really does. And when you were describing how the laughter lightens the load for us, it really does. I mean, even just for a moment, we can step outside of the problems that we're facing and just laugh, enjoy ourselves, just find some humor and some happiness in whatever, the topic is that the comedian is discussing or in your show. And, then it's like what happens when we take a break from something? We come back at it with fresher eyes, a new perspective, a different take on it, and we can often solve the problem where we
Exactly.
couldn't before because we were just like, we're coming at it like this. But
Yeah.
then when we step away and we open our mind, and then it's just like, oh, there it is. And, suddenly we can figure it out. So I completely agree with you on that. I think it's so beneficial when there's hard times, when you're facing difficult challenges, when you have a tough problem to solve, taking time for some laughter or just even stepping away is so helpful. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we've all heard the phrase, tragedy plus time equals comedy. And my point is, nobody said it had to take a long time. Like, that's not part of the equation. Just tragedy, and it could be a little bit of time. Doesn't have to be tragedy in a long time, and let's be realistic. There's certain tragedies you're not going to make a joke about and they're going to disappear. But sometimes the littler things, like let's practice with the little things. Like it's not a big deal that you got cut off in traffic. Like let's laugh that off and all relax and take a breath. There's bigger things that require a little bit more angst about, but at some point it's important to laugh.
Yeah, and, I hadn't heard that expression, but,
Oh,
it's an interesting way to think about it, right? It's anything can be funny if there's enough time, between the thing and your, moment of laughter, and you're right, like, getting off in traffic is one of those moments where instantaneously almost you can laugh about it.
right.
Yeah, and so absolutely, there are certain situations where it's a much deeper level, tragedy or difficulty, and in those moments, we're not saying you're gonna find it funny. No,
No.
hardly. Yeah. Okay, so where do I wanna go? Let's see. How do you define real optimism?
Mm.
And I think this is interesting because there's a lot of, positive thinking and positive affirmations and all of this. And so what are your thoughts on real optimism?
Yeah, I think there's a real big difference between sort of Pollyanna optimism and sort of, if the spectrum is Pollyanna optimism on all the way on the left and sort of, pessimism all the way on the right, like somewhere in the middle is like realism, right? Like you want to have a healthy sense of reality check so that you're not seeing like everything's coming up roses all the time. You can't like positive think your way to riches or success. You got to actually do something. But I think the balance is what I call anchored optimism. So if you kind of go to that midpoint where, being a realist is probably a good thing, that to me means you got a healthy outlook. You see things as they are. So you're aware of the obstacles in your path. So if you take a step, so if you go to that center point of realism and you take one step closer to the Pollyanna side, not too far, but just one step, that's anchored optimism. And what that means is you're optimistic enough to be in action, and you also have a healthy sense of reality check. I think where people get into a problem is on the extremes. So a pessimist, if you err too far on the realist side, then you might not see things working out. So the tendency would be to think, well, that's not going to work out anyway. Why bother? And then you don't do anything. So it's a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you're too Pollyanna and you're like, it'll all work out, but you think, if you wanted a chocolate cake and you're like, it'll all work out. Someone will get me, chocolate cake will magically appear at my door. Well, it doesn't work that way. But if you want chocolate cake, you can go to the grocery store and buy a cake mix, or you could, go to the grocery store and buy a fully baked cake. So, but you have to do that action. So anchored optimism is I see the reality of the situation. I see things working out. And because of that, I'm going to be in action.
Mm. Yeah. Okay. That's excellent. I think that I could absolutely see in my mind you're so far into that realistic, but it's to the negative. Yeah, and so you're like, "Oh my gosh, why even bother? I know it's not gonna work." I can absolutely see, and there's been days that I felt that. It's like, why even try? It's like, forget it. I could do so many other things with my time. Why even bother? But I love that anchored optimism. That's so great. What an interesting way to think about it, where you still have that realistic, you can understand like, maybe it won't work out, but maybe if I try, it might work out. And I love the idea of just try. So yeah, good
Well, I'll
stuff.
share with you the reason I call my show optimistic personality disorder is I do have that. That is it's not a disease, any medical textbook, but I sure have that in spades. And I noticed it when I was journaling. When I write comedy, I take it from my journal. So I just journal everyday things, what I'm feeling, what I'm up to, ideas, thoughts, dreams, all the things that you would journal. And oftentimes I will journal about things that are frustrating so that I'm working the problem as part of my thought process is I write it out. And I was going through my divorce and I was writing out, how I think this is really going to go smooth. And, I'm really feeling upbeat about us being, really good friends at the end of this and co parenting really well. And it's just like the whole thing is going to go smooth. It was almost like I was trying to, like, come on, universe, this is the order I would like to place today, a really amicable divorce. And as I was journaling, I was like, that's weird that I think that because my entire 17-year marriage was kind of challenging. So it's weird that I would think when we were in love in the beginning and still weren't getting along, like now we're not in love, but I think the divorce is going to go smooth. Like, I think I might be the one with the problem. And and the phrase, I was like, it just kind of appeared on the page. I'm like, I think I have optimistic personality disorder. Of course, he has narcissistic personality disorder. So it was a nice little play on words. But it really, and then as I wrote the show, I could see that theme. Like I thought things were going to work out. And every decade has a story about, oh, I thought that was going to work out a little bit better. But, it's kind of funny. And when you look at life like that, now all my friends, it's such a joke. My boyfriend will be like, I think that's your OPD coming out. It's kind of fun.
Oh gosh, that's awesome. Thanks, Merritt. I appreciate you sharing that. I think it's so important. I love that you are journaling through the things that, you're just trying to work through. I think that's so We can all do that, and it's such a beneficial exercise. Sometimes it's just ranting on a page, right? And it's like getting that out, and then how much better do you feel once you've done that? And so you can then, work through those feelings, right? And you're working through that, "I think this is all gonna be okay," and it's like, "Well, I don't know why I thought that," but, still, it gives you an opportunity to get it out of here and get it onto paper, and you can look at it, and then I really think it changes its hold on you when you do that.
It absolutely does, but I will say the secret sauce to that is to learn to think like a comedian.
Mm.
And what I mean by that is there's formulas for comedy, like, the best stand-up comics make it look so easy, like, it's just, like, off the top of their head that they're saying this funny thing that just happened to them, but I promise you, most of them, it's very well scripted, it's scripted down to the syllable if you're a Jerry Seinfeld, practitioner of comedy, but I learned that there's certain questions to ask, so as I was journaling, um, it doesn't happen immediately for me, but generally I'll journal first, just like no agenda to it, just get my thoughts out. And then I'll look at my page and I'll just kind of go, huh, how would a comedian see this? What's funny about this? What's unusual about this? What's embarrassing about this? And what I learned to do when I started studying comedy was to look at things as a third party observer. So, what you want to do is observe what you are observing. So I was journaling a frustrating scenario, and then I'm like, "Huh, what is it for me? Like, what resonated with me? Why did that story or situation even resonate with me enough to journal about it?" And so now it's a whole nother element of what I'm observing about myself, observing this situation. And there's a lot of comedy that comes out of that.
Yeah. Merritt, that's such a great point too, because you're almost adding another level, like another filter. And so we are stepping one more away
Yeah.
from the problem
Yeah.
or the situation or whatever. And so then it gives us an even different perspective when you're taking that next step away from whatever it is that you wrote about. So I think that's such an interesting idea. I'm going to try. And
Yeah.
I think the listener should try, whatever you're journaling about, come at it from that third party perspective and what's funny about this and or like you shared, what's embarrassing or whatever about it. So I think that's so cool.
Thanks.
Yeah, love it. Okay. So then let me ask you something. Do you think that we can change our past?
Mm, that's the $1,000,000 question. I think, reality, right? Like we just spent a lot of time talking about reality. You cannot change the events of your past, right? Your past is your past. What happened, happened. What you can change is your perspective on it. You can rewrite the narrative of it. You can tell the story differently. So, as an example, I had a past story about we talked about my marriage, so I'll throw my ex under the bus a little bit, but he is a narcissist and I had a lot of stories about that. I made myself a victim first of all, but I also made myself responsible and I used to tell the story about like, how did I get into that? Where did I go wrong? How did I not see it? How did I allow that to happen for so long? And your brain will answer the questions you ask it. So if
Mhm.
I said, how did I let that go on so long? Then I just got more answers to the questions of like, well, you ignored this and you ignored that and you were trying to be a good mother, but maybe that wasn't the best path for your son and it was just this drama, drama, drama. So when I looked at things that frustrated me through the comedy lens and asked, what's funny about being involved with a narcissist for 17 years? All of a sudden, comedy appeared. And it was like literally one of the first jokes I ever did on stage was, my husband is great and he thinks so too. And, it was funny. but it released it. And by the way, he was in that audience and laughed along that joke. But at the end of the show, he said to me, "It's a good thing you're married to me. I made you funny." And I'm like, wow, okay. That just encapsulated everything. I don't think you can change your past, but I do think you can write a better narrative, tell a better story, and that can change your future. And so that's really what I'm more interested in. Most of my audiences for my shows are women just like me, women in their 50s. We've all been through some stuff. And we all are at that point at this stage of life for most women in their 50s. Our children are grown, they're out of the house. We're looking at our guy going, "Is this what I want?" Like this is the pattern. So I'm not saying everybody should blow up their marriage, but you have a chance to reinvent. And to do that, the access to that is to look at the stories in your life, keep the ones that serve you, the future that you want, rewrite some of the narratives of what doesn't serve you moving forward, and then create a future based on a past of your choosing. And I think that's been a very valuable experience. So I actually do, I call it the work show experience. It's kind of a 2-day workshop, but it's like my show is the meat in the middle. So at the beginning, it's like, well, let's talk about, like, how did I create this show? How did I mine my life for the stories? I do this exercise. It's like the timeline of your life. Like, let's graph your life, the highs and the lows. And then let's take some highs and take some lows and write them like a comedian would. And you don't have to perform it like a show, but once you know this new narrative, it's a whole new way of telling your life story. And
Mhm.
so people get a chance to actually like understand the mechanics of how I did that, then they see it in action, and then the next day they come back and they start writing their own story. And then the secret sauce is I take some of their new narrative and I put that into lyrics of a song. So ChatGPT and I create lyrics of a song, and then I have an app that I use that, they'll have a new life story song that they walk out of the workshop with. It's really, really fun.
Oh my gosh. Oh, that sounds amazing. Yeah. So cool. And such an interesting idea of rewriting the narrative and the story that we're telling ourselves about the experiences that we went through. Because I think you're so right. We maybe we realize it or we don't realize it, but we are telling a story about what happened. And a lot of times it's not good. And so if we can rewrite the way that whatever it is about the experience that happened to now serve the future we want to have. I love the way that you brought that together because it's so important, right? We're looking at what kind of life do we want to have from now and going forward.
Yeah.
Those things happened. And no, we cannot change the experience itself, but we can change what we think around it, what we say around it, all of that to have a better future. So I love that. And what a cool idea that you just shared about, writing a song about it. And, we can all do that, right? It's like, make your own new theme song. How cool is that?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I loaded my script up to ChatGPT and I said I want a song about my show. And then I put it in this app I use called lovesong.ai or something. It's really cool. And the next thing I know, it's like literally a song about my show, and which is a song about my life. And it's just fun, like lighten up, have a little fun with your life. You had some awful experience, write it out and ask ask AI to make it funny for you. Like, it's not that complicated, but just see what happens and see if you can, find some lightness and laughter in your own life.
Mm. Yeah. Such a great reminder, Merit, for all of us. We are facing difficult times and we have had challenges in the past. I don't know what anybody, the listener, what stories they've had in their life, experiences that they've had, but we've had them. And we need time also to lighten up
Yeah.
and have fun and find some joy and some laughter. And We have to. I mean, we just can't be sad and angry and bitter and mad and all of those emotions all the time.
Right.
It's not good for us. So, I mean, we've got to find the laughter and we've got to find the joy and the fun times. So, yeah, I think that you're on it. So, thank you for sharing it with us.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay, let's see. What else do you hope that your audiences will take away from the show? I mean, besides, their guts hurting from laughing so much and their cheeks being sore from smiling, what is it that you really want them to take away?
Well, eh, from a cause perspective, I do have some stories in my life about, being in a relationship with a narcissist that we've talked about, and so I have had women come up after the show to say, "Wow, I heard some things even through your jokes that sound a whole lot like my life, and maybe I'm gonna go and look into that and, get some therapy or whatever." And so I had that. I had one time a 15-year-old girl, and she was there with her mom. Actually, she was there with her mom and her grandma, so it was 3 generations of ladies coming to see the show, and I was like, "Wow, that's really cool." And I wasn't interviewing her, but, I had a videographer, and he was asking people their experience of the show, and asked this young girl, like, "What did you get out of it? How did you relate to it?" And she said, "I have a narcissist in my life, and I'm going to, set better boundaries." And I'm like, "Okay." I didn't know that that was an outcome, but that was really cool. So that was one message, but I also have a story about genetic testing is near and dear to my heart. I had tested positive for a genetic defect that increased my risk for breast and ovarian cancer, and I really love being in front of women audiences to share that message, to have people know what's available to them. I believe genetic testing allowed me to make some choices in my life that without it I would have been at the mercy of circumstances, but having had that testing, I was able to make some proactive choices. And that felt very powerful to me. And so there's enough in the show that you get that story, but you get the comedy that comes out of it as well. But it's an important moment, and I do feel very strongly that there's so many, tests that we can do that are available today that, it's just really important to me that people have all the information that they need to make the best decisions that they can about their lives. And so, I'm actually actively pursuing, like, if you're listening out there and you work for one of those companies with genetic testing or functional medicine testing or things like that, like, I think they would be a great sponsor of the show because I'm a natural, authentic, real proponent of that, and I like that my show can spread that message in a way that it's not like an advertisement, it's not like it's just a story and you relate to it and then you're inspired to take action, and that means a lot to me.
Mm. Yeah, it sounds like you are really inspiring people in many ways. And by your example of the young girl who like recognized something in somebody in her life and realized, I need to make some changes with this.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for sharing about the genetic testing options. And it's like not even anything I would have thought of coming out of your show. But thank you for, sharing that because I think you're right. We need to know what is going on with our bodies, right? And so having an opportunity to do that kind of testing gives us options and choices, and we can decide how we want to tackle whatever we discover, if there's anything, that we find. And so, yeah, I mean, great stuff. Thank you for sharing that with us now because never would have thought of that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just so important, and the show gives me a platform to talk about things that are important to people, but wouldn't come up in everyday conversation.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the beautiful things about theater is it gets the conversations happening in important ways. I grew up 30 minutes outside of Manhattan, so I saw a lot of Broadway shows growing up, and that was, just something that always really resonated with me. Sometimes it's just, it's a good song and dance number, And other times there's something that leaves with you and you're just like, that changed me in a way. That little piece. So that's what I want to do with it.
Yeah, you're so right, Merit. Honestly, I think all art, music, theater, books, all of that changes who we are by the experience of it. And so I completely agree with you. I think that is so beneficial and we get so much from it. If nothing else, we're entertained for a little while. But a lot of times we do leave with a completely new idea or perspective or, something that just brings us joy and makes us laugh and,
Yeah.
a smile on our face. And, yeah, I think it's great.
One of the things I'll share about is when I first did the show, it was for my 50th birthday. I rented out a theater, 166 seats. I did sell tickets to my birthday party, which is kind of weird, but I put a lot into it, and I had some expenses, so I was just like, I'll host the party afterwards, but buy a ticket to the show. And I thought it was going to be one night only, and the original title was Book of Merit because it was my life story, and that was the end of it. It was going to be one night only. At the end, I realized after I had heard everybody's, responses to it, I thought, "Okay, well, we definitely have to do that again." This was way bigger than I thought it would be. And then, I changed the title because the point of it was not to tell you my life story. Like it was when it was my 50th birthday, it was about me. But I've edited since, but it's not my life story that matters. It's that you see something for yourself in hearing my story. And whatever you see for yourself inspires you to rewrite your past to rewire your future or find the funny to turn a bad situation around when things go awry or travel more because travel isn't about where you go, it's about the people that you meet, and sometimes it's about the journey back to who you've always been. And those messages, those were the sticky parts, and those were why I really knew, like, there's something bigger that's happening here. It's not about me at all anymore. It was, but it's not. And now with the work show experience, it's really, how can I be the conduit for what you want to create in your life? And that's what I'm here to do.
My gosh, that's fabulous. So good. And you're right. These stories that we share, initially they are about us, but it's also sparking something in the person who's listening, an idea, a new concept, something they didn't know before. It's like maybe even something that they recognize about themselves that they go, maybe I need to do something different.
Yeah.
And, it just gives them just this new idea. And I love that. So it's just beautiful. Good stuff.
Thanks.
Oh gosh. Okay. So let's see. At this point, would you share with us, and specifically the person who's listening, anything that you think, you haven't shared to this point in our conversation that's really important that you think they should hear? What would you like to share?
Well, I'll share something that I talk about when I do business keynotes, and that I think the 4 most important words that change everything are you open to? And a lot of my work and my ideas and, the whole show came about because I was open to creating a new possibility. And I think in business or in life, you know, if you're closed to a new idea, if you're closed to, well, that's how it's always been, so that's how we have to do it. If you're closed-minded, you're stuck. There's just no possibility that you're gonna be able to create with a closed mindset. And and I really feel that one of the greatest things I got from my parents' teachings, and I tell a great story about my dad in my show with this message, but also books I've read, like Mindset by Carol Dweck is a great book. But I think the idea of being open-minded, being open to new possibilities just creates an environment for new ideas to foster. Whereas if you are running around like, well, it is what it is, then you're kind of leading a very limited life. And so that's what we hadn't talked about that I would leave people with too is, just look for opportunities to just bring an open mind to something. Do something you've never done, you know, really listen to somebody on the other side of the political aisle, right? There's so many places where we're just closed and we're not even hearing each other anymore. And I think that's a shame.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's such a great concept. Are you open to? And I think if we ask ourselves that question, it does open up a huge variety of opportunities. I mean, in any direction. It's like, are you open to taking a hike? Oh, I'm sure. Maybe I hadn't thought about it till now. I mean, whatever it is, are you open to? And that question is so great. We ask ourselves that. I think that it does just create so much opportunity. You're so right. And
Thanks. I like to say questions are the answers. Ask the right questions, you'll get the right answers.
oh yeah, that's a
About
good way
what
to
you
think about
ask.
it.
Yeah, it's about what
Mhm.
you ask, not what you tell. And,
Mm.
it's not for me to tell somebody, here's what I'd like you to get out of my show or my keynote or my training or coaching or any of those things. It's like, let me ask you some questions. What do you want to get out of it? What's important to you right now? And people know. And then just, are you open to receiving that in this way?
Mhm.
Okay, great.
Yeah. Good stuff.
Thanks.
Thank you again for that, Merit. It's beautiful. Oh my gosh. Okay. So let's go ahead at this point and share with the listeners. You mentioned a book in there, Mindset by Carol Dweck.
Yeah. DWECK. Yeah, I really like that book.
Okay, fantastic. I'll include that in the show notes. Is there any other books or podcasts that you think have been helpful for you or beneficial that you'd like to share with the listeners?
I listen to so many podcasts. Every time I'm interviewed on a podcast, I'm like, "Oh, another podcast I wanna be listening to," so that's fun. So, no, there's none that, like, pop into my head because 'cause I'm all over the map on my podcast. But books, I'm old school. I like a lot of the Tony Robbins stuff. Oh my gosh, what am I reading lately? I don't know. We'll go with Carol's book. I like Influence by Robert Cialdini. I think that was a good one for me, just understanding the principles of influence. So that was more of a businessy book. Yeah, I'm constantly reading. I have a ton of stuff on Audible and yeah. Right now I happen to be reading a lot of plays, so that's why it's like, what books have I read? I'm reading a lot of one woman shows right now, so
Mm.
I'm reading a lot of scripts and I want to get a better sense. I'm constantly tinkering with my show and how could I make this better? And so that's a big focus of me for right now.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. And I think just really the point of me asking this question is to give people an opportunity to discover something new. And it's
Mm,
like, what are you open to? Right? Are you
yes.
open to this? Because they may discover something that they never would have before by checking out a new book, a new podcast, whatever. Just even your idea of reading the scripts. I mean,
Mm.
that's something too. It's like, what can you discover from reading scripts for people's shows? Right? It's just an opportunity. It's an invitation to try something new,
I
to
did just,
sharing.
like, pull up my podcast thing, so now I'm like now that I'm seeing them, I would definitely listen to Moms Unhinged podcast. So, Moms Unhinged is a group that I tour with for stand-up comedy, all mom comedians, all mom audiences, theaters across the country. It's super fun. Moms Unhinged. So, we just launched a podcast, like, September of '25, and so that's a fun one. I also like a friend of mine, I knew her years ago. We were in a mastermind group together, but she's got an incredible business. Her name is Christine Hassler, and she's got a podcast called Life Coaching. I really like that. That's just some really good stories. She's an excellent coach. So that's one of my go-tos.
Well, thank you so much, Merritt. I appreciate you looking those
Yeah.
up and sharing those with us. I'll detail all of that in the show notes. And so, lastly, Merritt, would you share with the listeners how they can find you, follow along with all of the great stuff that you're doing, any social sites you want to share? Take it away.
Absolutely. So on Instagram and Facebook, I'm Merit Kahn, Meritkahn. So that's pretty simple. If you went to meritkahn.com, you would find all the stuff about my speaking business and the keynotes and trainings that I do. The most important website would be opdshow.com, or you could go to optimisticpersonalitydisorder.com if you really like to type things out the long way. But opdshow.com will get you there, and you'll see a little bit about the show and the work show experience and the tour dates. I have a theater I regularly perform at in Denver, Colorado. So that's fun. And currently building the tour for Q1 of 26. So if you got a theater and you want a great one-woman show, call me.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so great and so exciting. Congrats again on the show success, on touring, expanding your tour for next year. That's so, so exciting. Thank you again, Merritt, for coming on the show and sharing this with us. It's been a delight to have you on. And thank you so much for all of this wonderful wisdom and laughter and joy that you're sharing with us. Thank you.
Aw. Thank you so much, Desiree. I enjoyed it.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk more soon.
Okay.
Thank you, dear listeners, for tuning in to another insightful episode of the Pockets of Knowledge podcast. We appreciate your time and curiosity as we explore fascinating topics together. If you enjoyed today's discussion, be sure to join us next week for another amazing episode. Remember, your journey of learning and growth is a continuous adventure, and we're thrilled to be part of it. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Until next week, stay curious and keep exploring those pockets of knowledge.